So along with the gaining affordability is the increase of foreclosures, increase of inventory, the decline in sales every time. So interest rates declining doesn't say, oh, this is going to get better.
Mhm.
It just says affordability. That's a math function. Is it more affordable? Yep. Does that matter? Never has.
Hi, this is Kris German, and welcome back to the Apartment Dealer Show. As a real estate investor, let me ask you this. If you had the opportunity to sit at the feet of a master, and when I say a master, an individual who had bought and sold not just a few hundred real estate projects, but say several thousand real estate properties, and had done so successfully, becoming, of course, a self-made millionaire through that process. But over the course of that time, that individual as a student learned to look at the dynamics of the market and why did the market seem to go in ebbs and flows, and then was able to put that information together, disseminate it, and then be able to accurately predict whether the market was going to go up or whether the market was going to go down. Well, I have such a person with me here today in the studio, Mr. Bruce Norris, who has written reports like this. This was the last report that Bruce wrote prior to his semi-retirement. I was a student in the room. But you know, if any of you are familiar with Bruce Norris, I call Bruce Norris the Sultan of SoCal real estate. But again, an individual who's been able to accurately predict whether values were going to go up or go down and either make investors a bundle of money or save them a lot of heartache. Today, we're going to ask Bruce to get his take on what's going on within the real estate market. Of course, his experience, his expertise is within single-family residential real estate. But of course, that has an impact on us as multifamily investors. He and I are going to sit for this conversation, look at what parameters, what statistics, what does Bruce analyze as he's trying to predict which direction the market is going, and then what impact does that have on you and I as multifamily investors? Is it as the single family market goes, so does multifamily market? Do they go in opposite directions? How do they interact with each other? For all that, we have Mr. Bruce Norris with us here in studio. Let's go to that interview. So Bruce, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kris.
It's a pleasure to have you in studio. Usually we're either doing this live on stage in front of the audience or via Zoom. It's nice to have you here with us, have a little bit more personal conversation. But as I mentioned in the intro, I mean, your reports, which I have two here and I hold on to because, you know, fundamentals never change, principles don't change. And these really are textbooks for investors. And of course, your last report here, a lost decade or 1% interest rates. Every time you write a report, of course, you're putting your neck on the line or reputation on the line because it's tough to say the real estate market's going to do one thing or the other. Looking at your last report, a lost decade or 1% interest rates, since writing this report, how have things played out? Let's start there. How have things played out since this report?
Yeah, I think that's one of those two outcomes is what has occurred. You haven't got the interest rates, so you've used up your future price increases. And that's probably going to be the way it is for quite a while. So you get exuberant, you go to a certain price level or a certain affordability number. But then historically, you usually gain that back. But this time, there might not be any help with the interest rates. So the only place that comes back to play is either your wage gains gradually make you buy more, or you have price declines. But there's something missing in the price decline. You don't have a bunch of REOs. So you probably have a lost decade. And that's what that was basically dealing with, is saying, okay, almost like rents in Florida went up 50% in 2 years. That's not normal,
right?
And so we used up our rent gains for years, but they're in place, thank God, but we used them up. In a way, that's what happened to real estate. When you had a 3% mortgage rate, your price, and you had exuberant buyers that wanted it, you got to a price point per month that was the breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're at the breaking point. You should have price declines, but you don't, because all these people with 2.5% mortgages have a payment less than rent. They're not losing them, they're not going anywhere. So what's for sale is less than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very little urgent have to sell inventory. And that's one of the keys after looking at all these charts for all this time. It's like, why did that happen? There's a really interesting stretch, 1980. So I'll give you just some of the numbers. We have 24 months of inventory for single family residential, 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy number.
Mm-hmm.
You have an interest rate that's 17. You have a 10% unemployment. How much price did you lose? Nothing. Zero. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, but that's the truth. That's what I like about charts. You have to deal with that. Oh my God. And then over here, you go to 2008, we have a mortgage rate that's less than half of that, and you have 50% price decline, and you have inventory of 8 months, not 24. So how did that happen? And so that's what's fun about charts. If you don't have an agenda, that's the biggest thing about figuring out stuff, is you don't go in with preconceived notions. Like, this is what I believe is true. No, why don't you just look at the charts and let them speak to you? Because it always is a little different.
When you look at this, so the point about interest rates and the prices, so you have an era where interest rates were exceedingly high, not much loss in price.
Well, let's think about that for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
So from 74 to 80, interest rates went from 7 to 15. And a lot of time you listen to people say, of course, when interest rates go up, prices
go down.
down. Mm-hmm. But prices tripled during those years.
Right, which is very strange. At least
it seems to defy logic.
Right.
But since it happened,
that's reality.
Yeah, and so you go, okay, well, what was the combination of factors that allowed that to occur? And so that's what's neat, because then you can take that information and you can bring it forward to the next decade and the next decade and see if it's rhyming with anything.
So that period of time, just as a specific period of time, what's the one takeaway of why that defied logic? What made that happen?
We are in a replication of that time. You had in place a 7.5% mortgage, and you had a market at 15. We have in place a mortgage that's 3 and a marketplace that's 6.
Mm-hmm.
Did foreclosures dominate in the 80s? No, he didn't, because the guy had a mortgage at 7.5. He's good. So you didn't have a bunch of foreclosures. You didn't have price damage. So that's the one thing that's similar. The interest rates are very different, but the concept is this guy wanted to sell his house, but he'd have to go from a 7.5 to a 15? I don't think so. And this guy has to go from a 3 to a 6.5. Same factors keeping them in place and allowing them to have a payment that's probably less than rent. Isn't that interesting that 4 years later, there we are?
Yeah. And so then you jump to, most people, have the greatest emotional experience during 2008, 9, and 10, right? The great real estate recession, many people call it. And obviously we're a far ways from there, but here we are in a market now that, like you say, we haven't had that price damage. Interest rates are probably around norm. I think most people would say that when you have less than 6, that's probably stimulus. We're around a norm, but the single family market, it's stuck in mud. And so.
See, that's interesting. Okay, so below 6 has nothing to do with stimulus. It just doesn't. So how can you have a price triple when your interest rates double? That's not stimulus. So there's other stimulus. So when you have interest rates go down, all you've had is an increase in affordability. Do other charts cooperate and say, oh, well, this is a healthier market? Never. Never. So along with the gaining affordability is the increase of foreclosures, increase of inventory, the decline in sales, every time. So interest rates declining doesn't say, oh, this is going to get better. Mm-hmm. It just says affordability. That's a math function. Is it more affordable? Yep. Does that matter? Never has. until somebody wants it simultaneously with you. And that's not true.
And so we're at a point that, interestingly enough, values for homes have, even in the last couple of years, have had modest increases because at least here locally, because the supply, the way I understand it, I'm a multifamily guy, but from what I read, because the supply is so low that, hey, if you really want to buy a home, you got to do the deal at the seller's price. There's not, because the sellers aren't all that motivated if you're sitting on a low interest rate. Now, there's a lot of talk now that says, well, that this year you're going to see the change, that there's this pent up demand on the seller's part, that even with that low interest rate, people still have needs. Maybe they want to get out of California because of the mass exodus of people and migration, and other things like jobs and family that have always stimulated moves. What does your spidey senses say about, going forward here this year? Are we going to see a difference than what's been happening the last?
Are you going to see a shift in mood to where the strength is now on the buyer side instead of the seller side? I don't think so, because the seller is still a private seller. If you said, okay, well, there's now bank properties involved in that to a great extent. It's always interesting. I watch people. You go to YouTube, it's like, oh my God, this is terrible, and they always use percentages. So here's a percentage. So in Florida, foreclosures have gone up 174% in a year. Oh my God. Okay, they were 1% of the inventory. So in the whole year of 2023, if you had 1,000 sales, you had 1% of them deal with short sale or foreclosure. In California, ratio is similar. Okay, it's almost non-existent. You know what it was in 2008? 70%.
Of all inventory that's sold, that changed hands.
Yeah. So your increase by percentage of 1% to 2 point something, it doesn't dominate anything. Think if you're an appraiser, you have a comp that's an REO by chance, and you have 5 other comps that are normal.
Sure.
You just toss it. It's not the dominant proof.
Yeah. We were just evaluating a multifamily property yesterday. One of my guys brought me the comps. One was really low. The others were all about the same. Well, there's something about that sale we just don't know.
Right.
We just put it aside. There's something was wonky about the property, the seller, or something. But to your point, it's not 4 of those and only one that we would expect. It's just,
Yeah, see, that's why REOs are so damaging if they're dominating, because they'll dictate the value of everything. So let's say in 2008, you're not going to sell your personal residence. That price went from 300 to 80, so you probably can't sell it. So what is for sale is the lender who can take 80, because they own it free and clear, basically. They foreclosed on it. Now all the comps are that, and it dictates the value of everything. That's a very dangerous scenario, and it has only happened once in our lifetime. Let's just quickly go to, so California has some, lovely times where this chart shows you the price increases. So you've got, from 74 to 80, prices went crazy. They actually tripled from 34 to 102. So, most of our life we've enjoyed that chart, and once in a while, it calms down, and sometimes it crashes. And so that's what's fun about when you're playing with charts, is you try to figure out, okay, what made that happen? What was unusual about 2006? Because we were euphoric right then. That's how it got there. And then all of a sudden we weren't. So what was the thing that caused that? So when we were trying to figure out how all this worked, we looked for comps. Basically, that's what we tried to say. And the first one I found out was affordability. So what was replicated was, you got to where the gold line was. 17% was really the number that when you got there, you were done. You couldn't get a yes answer from a lender unless you were in 2005 and 6, where they didn't care if you really qualified. So that's why the number went down even further. Now you're there again. I think the lending is legit as far as having to get it, but you're maxed out. That affordability, by the way, doesn't usually camp there. It goes up. And it goes up not because of earnings, it goes up because of price damage or something.
Now, if I'm looking at the chart correctly, normally you hit this 17%, and within a year or two, the market reacts.
Right.
And we haven't
No, you haven't. You're still camped out there. But what I'm going to show you is what the other charts do when this goes up. It's more affordable, so doesn't that help the real estate market? No. Okay. I'll just review this. So we had affordability, so now we're taking a look at comps. So this is the difference between new houses and existing homes. So whenever you have a peak, your existing homes exceed your new home price because you just don't have enough new ones. So the demand goes to the existing. California gets to a certain percentage of national average, and then it goes down. So it gets up to 250, and then goes back to a more normal number. Median household income multiple. So you're at 9, you were at 10 in the crazy times of 2007. What's interesting about this is when it's really affordable, say 2009, like the most affordable been forever, did anybody want it?
Right.
You had to bribe them with $8,000. See, that's the emotional cycle of the buyer. The buyer was fearful there. They were euphoric in 2006. If you had something for sale, I had 70 offers one time before noon on a pretty junky property in San Bernardino. Right. It was just that mood. You were just like, okay, people are going to take this. And
well, it becomes the social norm. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah. Well,
why don't you have one? And now, well, why would you buy a home? Look at the affordability. It's cheaper to rent. Why would you, the negative talk?
In 2007, I think I had to get my hair cut by 3 people because they were going to be investors. They left, did that. Okay, and this is a moodometer. This is basically the percentage of income it takes to buy a house. But I renamed it because it's actually a great cheat sheet for calculating where the group of people are as far as the mood to own something. So the higher it is, you're close to euphoria. And you have no choice but to be there because there's still just more demand than there is supply. And so now what you're saying is you think that that's going to change, but the inventory type is very important because the person with the 3% mortgage, if they don't get what they want, I'll stay, unless they get transferred. But even then, they may think the loan is more important than the property. And just keep it.
Right.
Right? Say the heck with that. Okay, so I'm just going to go quickly to where we have this thing that happens. So you hit affordability at 17, and then it goes up. And this is what happens to inventory. As affordability goes up, your inventory goes in 1980 to 82, 4 months to 22, 6 to 13, 2.5 to 9, and now very little. It tripled. Again, you want to use percentages. If inventory's up 300%.
Right.
But still, 3 months is not
It's
a
not
big deal.
much, not a big deal at all.
But look at what happened. 2 years after you hit that magic number of low and affordability went up, like you said, a couple of years later, it's way higher. Didn't affect these charts in a positive way at all. Okay, so your inventory explodes. Your sales. So your sales go down sometimes by half. But certainly so it's more affordable, you have more inventory, and you have less sales.
So homeowners are bad investors is essentially what,
well,
I mean, they're jumping at the wrong time.
Of course, yeah, that's why, because the mood is what see, that's why I love that moodometer, because it goes, oh, you hate it, I'll take some. I'll take as many as I can get. And when you're up here, you can have my stuff.
Yeah.
So it's the greatest cheat sheet ever.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way.
Right.
Because it calculates the mood of the participant. So you know when you're in that market, you put everything up for sale and everybody wants it at the same time. That's not normal. Just like now, it's the opposite in a way in Florida. So if you have a $700,000 house for sale, when you get an offer, it's the only one. And I think the buyer pretty well knows that too. So we're in escrow with 3 properties, and we have a list of, I'd like this changed, or I'd like this done. In 2006, that never happens. But it happens this year. Because we're still pending, people want it, but it's got some to-do list with it, because they know they can. They're the only buyer, let's say. So attitude change. So new home construction, so it gets more affordable. Your new construction sometimes, look at 2005 to 7. Of course, REOs were for sale, way below replacement costs. So the construction industry just got killed. Okay. So this all happens every time. Unemployment, so you've got more affordable. That's the unemployment in the 2 years following.
So in order, as the single family market stands now, would your guess then be, in order for us to get stuck out of the mud, because we've become stagnant the last couple of years, it's either the economy goes in a positive direction, either the economy expands, or this is where we sit because, again, we lack a motivated seller?
Well, that cover kind of contemplated all of that. I think you're in for a decade. You used up everything very quickly, and it pegged the mood at the highest mood, the affordability at its low, and there's no history of when that improves the real estate market. It doesn't. Okay, so we've used up all the goodies for a while, and we have to get back to where the buyer is more anxious than the seller. And you're saying in California that's coming, but it's the wrong inventory for that to come. It's a guy that has a house that's got no mortgage or a 3% mortgage. Mm-hmm. He's not that motivated.
Not that motivated.
He'll just go, no, forget it. He'll just keep it. Okay, I really think that's the typical answer. Or the seller will realize, okay, I'm not as strong a seat as I thought, so I'll buy it. Okay, so I think that's why you don't have a lot of price increases in California, but you don't have price declines either.
Right.
You're at that number. You look at all those comps as far as the numbers. You're maxed out. Affordability is historically at its low. It's at 16. Normally it's 17 when all those other dominoes fall. So where are you going to put, if you don't have the absolute euphoric buyer with a lender that's willing to let everybody lie in an application, it's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. So you have a math formula that says, okay, they're not going to get a yes answer. There's just going to be so many people that want it at that price level. And the euphoria is gone, right, as far as the buyer crowd. Mm-hmm. And that's how you usually get there. You get to 17 when you have 20 offers by noon. Well, we don't have that now. Mm-hmm. So now the seller, they're losing some confidence, but the buyer is also going, I really do want one, or want this one. That's why I think it's a stalemate. I really do. I think interest rates going up or down do not impact it a huge amount. I think if you could get like you said, an under 6% or 5% mortgage, that's a big stimulus. It doesn't appear to be at all.
Not enough to.
Well, affordability went up. That's all it says to me. Well, when affordability goes up, what else? What else?
Right.
What else always happens? Nothing good.
Nothing good.
Nothing good. I know that doesn't sound reasonable. Right. That's why I like charts. You can go, okay, well,
because it takes your opinion out of it.
Yeah.
This is just the facts.
Well, because what you could say that and it would make very rational sense. Of course that happens. Well, no, it doesn't. Why? Because there's a human participant, and that moodometer says he's not in the mood to want that bad. He doesn't want it. That moodometer is pegged at 70%. Mm-hmm. It can go down to 30 something. It's good to be able to disconnect yourself from what you think has to occur and look at a chart and see if it ever has.
Now, Bruce, I know you're, a single family guy, but people come to you that information. Interestingly enough, I was watching the Patrick Bet-David podcast, who I'm a fan of, and maybe I forgot to mention this to you, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, the financial guy they have on there, Tom.
Yeah, I know Tom well. He texts me all the time. What do you think?
He said, I was calling because they asked him, Tom, give us some info on housing, and he's running down the list of his sources. And he says, and I talked to Bruce Norris out of California.
That was cool.
And I was like, hey, I know that guy.
That was cool. That made me feel really good.
Oh, so you heard that he mentioned you. Okay.
Well, yeah, we've met before.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we've met. I met with Patrick and gave him a report.
Okay.
Because I love the guy. I don't want you saying stuff that's not going to happen. Because he was a couple of years ago, remember, he was saying it was all going to crash. I was going, don't say that. I paid $20,000 to hand him that report. Oh. They had like a 4-hour meeting. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to meet the guy. And that's how I met Tom. Okay. So Tom, behind the scenes, has always asked me.
So what impact do you think this is going to have on the current market, single-family market, on the multifamily market, if you had to guess? So people can't buy homes, essentially.
Okay, yeah.
And sellers aren't motivated. I mean, is that basically the punchline? Is that they're going to rent longer because it's just not favorable circumstances?
Well, or migrate to a state that they can buy. I guess that would make sense. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, I think most of the time that's done by younger people, but I think there's people that are also seniors that cash out a check in California with a mortgage that buy something free and clear in another state. That makes a lot of sense. So, but it's interesting that you have such good support for no vacancies here, even though you're losing migration.
That's one of the things is that with all the talk about people moving to Florida and other places, in general, occupancy is very high.
Yeah. Well, you're not replacing single family houses. I mean, California used to go from, a terrible year was 60,000. So, that's 2007 type stuff, where it's at the end of the market and then, you have a problem. Then you go up to 160,000 gradually, and probably the last 3 or 4 years of that cycle is over 100,000. It didn't go over 60,000 for the last decade. So, all right, well, that's a lot of houses. You start accumulating that and saying, well, that's like 800,000 houses that are missing. Well, the people that are still here are going to live somewhere. Not going to buy a new house, but they are going to apparently rent your place.
Yeah. And what about the conversation with interest rates? You had said whether up or down, not going to have much of an impact, but what's your opinion on the Fed now has lowered the rates? I think, 3 times they've lowered it now, if I'm remembering correctly. And yet we've gone up in the interest rate for mortgages every single time.
Yeah.
Gil Figueroa, who speaks at our events as well, he shared with me that the day that the 10-year Treasury, which commercial loans are primarily tied to, the lowest it was the day before, literally the day before the Fed made the first cut in interest rates. And ever since then, it's only gone up. And the 10-year Treasury is flying high right now.
It's like 4.6, something like that. Yeah, and it was 3.6.
So what's your experience? What's your experience with that? How is it that the Fed's lowering rates, yet the market's just not reacting?
Yeah, that's why I like Gil, and that's why I like the team you put together, because he's the guy that would know the answer to that historically. It's always been fun to be a part of that. First of all, I liked who you were, and that's why I did what I did. But you also had really good speakers that I learned from every time, and hopefully I added to something that they wanted. So that was what's cool about that. But
I mean, a lot of smart people. What are they saying about why is this happening? The Fed's lowering the rates, and yet it's not doing anything in the way of mortgage rates.
Yeah, I think the lender is whoever makes that decision isn't buying that they want to have a 30-year mortgage at 4%. I could see some inflation happening when you have, Trump saying things like, we're going to give you tariffs. Okay, well, that's not cheap, right? There's some things that you go, okay, well, that sounds inflationary to me. So I think they're kind of hedging their bets until they see, is that all?
They're not buying it.
They're not like, you can lower that part of it, but I'm wondering if we're going to have inflation anyway. So you're going to have to reverse that way sooner than you think.
What's your pulse on supply in California, builders, the sentiment among builders? Because obviously, if there was more supply, that could change things. Where do you see things supply-wise?
Yeah, they're not going to change. You can't get a yes answer for a tract of land. Gentleman that I've known for years, he's 80-something years old. He had a tract of land that would produce the inventory that you would want in Menifee, right? Single-family starter homes. Took him 16 years to get a yes answer. 16 years. He got it finally.
Anything special or surrounding that, or no?
It's just the process. The process of nonsense. I used to have a lady that watched my dogs, and one time she said, "I can't do it this time because I've got a new job." I said, "What's your new job?" She said, "I go to this remote location in Palm Springs, and I have a very high-powered camera, and I am to take pictures of anything that moves so we can stop development." That was her job. She never watched my dogs again.
Right. She's not pro real estate. Yeah.
No, but that's California. So it's so expensive. You'd have to go, well, why would I do that? I'll go. Florida that actually says, yeah, please do that. California, just you go through so many hoops and bills that you shouldn't have to pay. That's why you're building 50 and 60,000 homes instead of 150,000.
So if the process is too involved to build, and economically, you take something like property insurance has only gone up dramatically. We've had these horrible fires within the last few days here. That's not going to help anything,
No.
right? Because that's the insurance companies' their biggest concerns is all the fire disasters, these wildfire disasters we've had. So, I mean, how long can we point to? Well, it's the weather. People are just going to pay the price in California because it's the weather. I mean, in other words, I know it's not the weather, but what else do you see people clinging on to that's going to still be like, well, it's still California real estate, even after all the politics, the affordability? Do you see that changing with the new generation?
I kind of do. And I think California has made a mistake about the ADUs. I don't know what your experience is with density, but density is not safe, right? In my head. There was a fourplex. I don't know do you remember a bunch of fourplexes in San Bernardino? They were in one area, and they were new. Probably they were built 20 years ago, and now none of them exist. They all got torn down because of crime. It was too dense. So now,
well, I'm familiar with. In certain cities, there's clusters of apartment buildings. I can think of a cluster right now in the city of Covina, a cluster in El Monte, where you just put that many people in one location. Lo and behold, crime.
Yeah,
it's higher there.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. So now, you're building ADUs without garages. So when Aaron passed away, the one thing I did is I drove to all the homes he had ever lived in. You know what was in common? Cars on the lawn. On the lawn, not on the driveway. On the lawn. One of them was a nice 5-bedroom house in Riverside, like where all the college professors live. There were 5 cars on the lawn. There's a 5-bedroom house on the lawn. Wow. I just was like, that's not smart. And now you're adding that. So you can add ADUs and no garages. I just think that's California's new version of supply of houses. That's not going to end well. It's been a fun journey. I never imagined they would turn into all these reports. I was just trying to figure out what the heck happened on the day that I bought Aaron a car, a Honda Civic for $15,700, and the next day bought a 3-bedroom house in Riverside for $13,300. I was just like, okay, what the heck happened to the California market? Because that's ridiculous. And so that started it, and I was just an honest search. And I wasn't even trying to do the work myself. I was trying to find the guy that had figured it out. So I went to the library and looked at microfilm for 25 years, trying to read all the articles and stuff to get the guy that figured it out. And I never found him. And I just thought, okay, maybe it isn't possible, but I'm going to give it a shot. And that's
found your calling.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. That's just, I was talking to a gentleman that lives in San Diego, and he did the same thing with the foreclosure business. He figured out the foreclosure business. His name is Ward Hannigan. He's over 80 years old. And he's taught all the people that make millions of dollars on that. He's taught all of them. And he charged $5,000, and you would go there personally with him, and he would make sure you understood it completely. But that was his niche. Yeah.
And any idea how many real estate transactions you've been involved in now?
Just for fun, I did. We added them up. It's about 150 a year for 40 years. So,
really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yes.
I had no idea it was that.
Yeah, 6,000 and change.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, remember hard money loans.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so it all rotated. We used to flip houses about 90 a year. So that was part of it. We built once in a while. We built 90 houses a couple of times. But most of it was the flip business for a long time. And then that grew into the hard money loan business. So those were the touches that we had that were constant,
And for those watching, okay, yes, interest rates have gone up. Yes, property insurance is slightly higher, but are you still betting on real estate?
Sure. Even betting on home ownership, because it mattered to me. It's interesting. That just meant something to me as a man, that there was just something about that. I wanted that deed in my name. I wanted to get to make decisions inside those walls. I write this report called the California Crash. I know prices are going to go, in half. And I sold 100 properties that I had, so I have my house left. I know it's going to go from $1.5 million to 700 grand. So what do I do with it? So I called a guy that had a really cool rental and said, I'm not your typical renter. I'll pay you a year in advance. He said, that sounds great. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Do you have any pets? And in that moment, I realized why I own a house. No one got to ask me that question. I sold that house for 750 grand, lost 700 grand, and would replicate that decision anytime because
You got to keep the pets.
I got to keep the pets and do it my way. When I first owned a house, I mean, that was a dream come true because that was being a man to me. I had been married at 17. I got to own the house at 20. And I cried when I did my first lawn, when I mowed my lawn. I was a man. That's what it means to me. So and that's not a math formula. That's just part of, what I viewed as the American dream and just say, I own my house. So that's a big piece of it for me. As far as being an investor and all that, most of what I have is investments that are all connected to either trust deeds or real estate ownership. So it's what I know. I don't know how to look at a stock and go, okay, I should do that, or, but I have a pretty good idea how to figure out if I want to do a trust deed or, buy a rental.
Sure. Yeah, you just followed the Carnegie plan where he said, put all your eggs in one basket and then just watch the basket.
That's right.
Just watch the basket.
Yeah.
So for an individual who's still on that growth path, even say like myself, mid 40s, I'm looking at real estate as a big function of my retirement.
Right.
So I'm still on growth pattern. And I make the argument to myself, to our clients, investors, to our audience, that it's all relative. So right now, okay, you might not be excited that yes, multifamily property values have gone down, let's say 10% at least, most communities here locally, at least. But and yes, you might not be excited about the higher interest rate, but you got the difference in price. The price has come down because there's now a higher interest rate. Had we not had the interest rates go up, you would not have had prices come down and thus cap rates go up.
Right.
So prior to interest rates going up, everyone was complaining prices are too high, cap rates are too low. Call me when the spreads are better, the returns are higher. Okay, prices came down, cap rates have gone up, so the overall rate of return has gone up. Yes, interest rates were the stimulus, but you always are going to have, if it wasn't interest rates, it was going to be some other stimulus. And back to my point of it being relative, if they're going to sell and do a 1031 exchange because they're selling and buying in the same market, it's all relative.
Right.
They're taking a little bit less for their property, but their money's going to go further today than it would have especially 3 or 4 years ago. I make the case that you still go forward. What say you after all these transactions?
Yeah, I think what you do is try to set people up to have inventory in better locations, right? I mean, you start here and let's move it to here and move it to here. And the math is probably a very close decision, but the long-term quality of the decision is better. And I think that's what you pay attention to. That, okay, people are coming here. This is an area that's going. And, a lot of what you're doing is very long-term, right? I mean, that's the idea. I'm going to own this. You might own what you have right now when you're 60. You just won't have a monthly payment.
Right.
That's the goal, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that's, I think, you just own this niche for me. That's why I've been happy to show up and do your, events. I just thought, that's a special guy. It really is. He owns that category.
Yeah. Well, I learned from special guys and so forth. So, well, Bruce, thank you. You've been more than gracious with your time. The
My
audience
pleasure.
appreciates your input. I appreciate your help over the course of these years. And even though you're semi-retired, I look forward to some more conversations hopefully in the future.
I'm sure we'll do it.
Get your input.
All right, Kris.
All
Thanks
right,
so
Bruce,
much.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, there you have it. That was a great conversation with the one and only Bruce Norris. I hope as Bruce was going through the items that he analyzes and has analyzed over the course of several decades in which has helped him become wealthy in real estate, that you took copious notes. And of course, we're going to be sharing those charts with you that Bruce was pointing to. Down here in the description of the show notes, we'll share a link to some of the information that Bruce was sharing so that you can have that, and hopefully that'll help you on your journey. But more importantly, I think the takeaway here, at least my takeaway, is that number one, real estate is still a safe bet. So don't listen to the talking heads on all the YouTube podcasts and these different things. Not to say that they don't have something important to say about real estate, but again, real estate is still a winning bet. Two, that while the market goes in ebbs and flows, You have to look beyond the emotion, your personal emotion, and take a look at what does this mean in the broader scheme of things when we're taking a look at long-term trajectory of the real estate market. So yes, things may be stagnant now, but what more importantly, what's my plan? What's my strategy? How does my next decision fit into that strategy, right? Thinking a few steps down the road. And three, just that ability to be a multifamily investor. Bruce shared, his emotional tie to himself being able to buy his first home, what that meant to him, and then obviously many transactions down the road. You as a multifamily investor, you're building a financial legacy. Question is, what's the next step? Yes, interest rates are slightly higher. Yes, here in California, we have rent control. Yes, property insurance has gone up, and there's probably a couple others that I left out. But nonetheless, what is it that you can do to take your legacy in a positive direction? Or for those that are looking to exit, if the next decade we're not going to see much movement in the way of values, then why are you hanging on? Is there other things that but are looking to move on to? Trips around the world, more time with family, just ease of not having management and so forth. Do you wait another 2, 3, 4 years in hopes that values will change dramatically? Again, according to Bruce, he doesn't expect that'll be the case. So then do you consider a move today to have more of a quality of life? So there's those two spectrums, right? Can it be wise to buy and sell in the same market? Of course, depending upon what your long-term goals are. If you're an individual like myself and my wife that are building towards retirement, then we're still looking at purchasing and expanding. Of course, we're underwriting each deal carefully, but nonetheless, act just as active today as, say, pick another year that maybe the market wasn't so rosy. And at the same time, for those investors that are looking for a change of pace, they're looking to, quote unquote, exit real estate for any number of reasons. Now maybe is the time to take a look at things closer. Again, I hope this information is helpful to you. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We have loads and loads of content planned for this year that's only going to help you on your real estate journey. And if you haven't, even share our videos with others that other investors, would-be investors. I think they'll find it helpful. Give the video a like. That helps get this content into the hands of other investors. You want to be as helpful as possible. And until next time, this is Kris German from The Apartment Dealer, wishing you positive cash flow, tenants who behave, and much protection from Uncle Sam. Till next time.